Hey everyone, welcome back to EHS Concepts of Ways of Safety. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're focusing on minimum manning in EHS, that baseline staffing required to deliver effective environmental health and safety programs without compromising compliance or worker protection. Anyway, it's a topic of discussion. So, we're going to examine the latest trends influencing staffing decisions, the ongoing complaints from EHS pros about understaffing. And then, of course, I like to get into real success stories where balancing that manning has driven, measurable improvements. Okay. So this episode is essential for understanding how staffing impacts everything from that risk reduction to operational resilience. So let's dive in. Starting with trends and topics in minimal manning for EHS in 2026, because that's the year we're in, right? Budget constraints. Okay. Budget constraints from economic pressures are a major factor, with 75% of EHS leaders reporting persistent talent shortages that strain compliance and the training efforts. Okay. A common benchmark is one EHS professional per 300 employees. Yeah, man, I'll explain all this stuff. Okay. But this adjusts for industry risk. Of course, higher hazard sectors like manufacturing, petrochemicals, they demand more robust ratios to handle complex operations. So you're going to have site-specific requirements. You may have state-specific requirements, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. So you got all these guidelines from organizations like even the Energy Institute. They stress comprehensive staffing assessments across normal activities, your emergencies, and of course the project life cycles, because you might be on a project that requires XYZ amount of people. So incorporating elements like employee competence, the management, and ALARP as low as reasonably practicable, hard to say sometimes, standards. So ALARP is easier to say, but there's tools such as the CRR 348/2001 methodology. You can look that up yourself, review it, so you'll be able to understand what that methodology is, but it aids in determining control room needs. Now, while AI-driven workload analysis is emerging to optimize allocations, okay, it's one of those things, but hybrid approaches is something that we need to discuss. So you're mixing internal staff with outsourced expertise. It's very popular for scaling capacity without permanent hires, especially amid growth or shortages or short-term, even long-term projects. So that's usually what happens sometimes, but make sure everybody talks, because sometimes there's a communication gap there, and it kind of hinders the progress, if you will. Now, in fields like sanitation and mining, variable occupational protections underscore how adequate manning is crucial for addressing these threats, like antimicrobial resistance, right? And again, I mentioned state to state differences. They complicate things greatly, right? So with some areas lacking defined ratios, pushing companies toward proactive baseline evaluations. So it's just something that's out there, right? You may not be aware of this, but the overarching shift is to resilient, data informing staffing, those measures that ensure skilled personnel are available precisely when needed. Now, getting into the complaints, because EHS professionals, they're sharing about minimal manning and this chronic understaffing, right? So there's discussions on platforms like Reddit's, safety professionals, you haven't been on there, go, and LinkedIn, of course, that reveal burnout as the dominant issue. And that's true. With individuals overwhelmed by workplace spanning across OSHA, EPA, and DOT requirements, to name, everything else. Without that significant backup, that's often resulting in duties being offloaded to also HR or operations, fostering a reactive rather than preventive mindset. So that's one of those things that, I guarantee you've seen it. I've seen it a million times. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I've seen it, I wouldn't need to work. But morale suffers with the increased incident rates. It does. It sucks. It hurts everybody. It affects everybody. Okay. So with those increased incident rates, stemming from overlooked procedures and retention issues. Those will rise. And then as teams grapple with those backlogs, the mental fatigue, and employees departing shortly after training because, like, I'm out. That's one of those things, right? So smaller organizations frequently cut EHS budgets, foregoing specialized roles, with larger ones contend with recruitment challenges as younger talent avoids the field, necessitating greater dependence on consultants. Because I'm telling you what, your consultants are usually your ones that have been in the field and they've been everywhere. They've seen a lot of things. They are the ones that have been in the trenches, and usually they're the ones that have seen everything, and they know, usually they can identify what the root cause of understaffing or undermanning is, and they know why. They know why they're there, and they know that there's there to precisionally get in there and scalpel what they need to. And sometimes that's not 100% figured out, and that scope can open up wide. And so instead of a scalpel, now you got a sledgehammer, if you will, or it's just one of those things that happen, and it really shouldn't, because we want our people we want everybody safe, and we want our company to prosper. So it's one of those things, right? So that's, again, that younger talent is avoiding the field. They're trying to go into those roles of, I'm doing this all day, right? Or, I'm in the classroom training all day. So they're avoiding that. And that's why there's a greater dependence now on consultants. So take that into account, right? Now, on paper, minimum manning may meet your requirements, but not in execution. So it's depleting. For example, like in maritime settings, Navy, right? Fixed crew sizes struggle against growing inspections and documentation demands, right? Okay. Occasionally, this is leading to compromised rest periods due to job security field peers, right? So leadership often perceives EHS as an expense rather than an investment, causing progress halts and disconnects, right? As one professional had stated, how many is too many? Emphasizing that while no single ratio works universally, skimping invariably heightens risk and job dissatisfaction and injuries and everything else, right? Add insult to injury. That's what you're doing there. So now let's turn to the brighter side of, with success stories that illustrate the rewards of effective minimum manning, right? So a Texas semiconductor manufacturer transformed from non-compliance to full OSHA adherence through targeted staffing with external consultants. So that dramatically reduced risk and penalties. But again, standards are standards, right? So if you're just at standards, are you really being safety excellence, right? We all need to strive for safety excellence, because if we're striving for operational excellence, you're going to need safety excellence, and you can't get to operational excellence unless you have safety excellence. Anyway, I'll digress on that one, because I go on and on tangent for that one. And I have in other videos. But so according to Liberty Mutual data, every dollar invested in safety yields at least 3 in savings. And that's exemplified by Lockheed Martin's Paducah facility, which enhanced productivity by 24% and trimmed costs by 20% via dedicated EHS staffing and cultural shifts. Again, the proof is there to show you that EHS, or safety, is an investment that yields a return. A magic word called EBITDA. So if you have a safety program that's actually done right, with systems in place, you can increase your EBITDA by 4 to 7%. You're an EHS professional, or even if you're just EHS adjacent, whatever, and you just heard that, show this to your CEO and your VPs of everything, right? Go to your CEO and go, hey, listen to this. This guy's talking about 4 to 7% EBITDA. Read a book. Anyway, construction companies, and sometimes I don't say these companies' names correctly. I try to as much as I can, but I think it's La Machia or La Macchia Group and EDP Renewables, they minimize incidents and project delays with strong safety teams. So Grundfos established a worldwide EHS network featuring regional managers to bolster initiatives. And then while Sika advanced incident reporting and resolutions through transport software integration. This all led to the betterment of the company, safer work environment. People are happy. It's a win-win. And when it's a fight, some of us like to fight and argue. But there's got to be a point that there actually is a declaration of achievement. And that's where we don't get sometimes. And we need to get to that more often than not. Okay. Just my 2 cents. Oh, it's over here. Maximum effort. Right. So now let's talk about graduates from EHS accredited programs. They have found success. Some of them have found successive firms, right? Hellman Associates, I think it's EHAC accredited programs. They're adding over 500 businesses and safeguarding 65,000 workers or spearheaded VA efforts and boost staffing by 81%. We'll get into health of the environment, health and safety. They also increased VA's funding by 50%. So it's one of those things that, consultants do. So consulting-based flexible models, they offer on-demand skills, promoting that compliance, and it becomes almost a full-time addition, if you will, when you work that. Now, you have data-centric strategies. Now, when I say data-driven or data-centric strategies, it's you're beyond the intuition of refining that staffing, right? So you're not just going with your gut or what you feel like. You actually have statistics and metrics behind it, especially because it's data, right? It's data-centric. So that's how you're going to refine that staffing. And when you do that, your leaders, most leaders note that proper resourcing will amplify that program's and that system's effectiveness. Now, we can get into OSHA's extensive case studies across industries because, it's vast industries. It demonstrates how hazard fixes translate to business advantages. And, forecasts for 2026 highlight prioritizing durable staffing for superior outcomes beyond mere minimums. And just so you know, I've been a part of companies that bare minimum EHS, bare minimum safety happen. And not that EHS will give up, because if you got anybody in EHS worth their salt, they're tenacious. They will talk to you. They will fight for you. They will fight with the C-suite or anybody in between, middle man. It doesn't matter. We have a purpose. We have a mission, and that is to save lives and keep people healthy, and then in regards, hopefully happy. Sometimes you can be healthy and not happy. You are. Anyway, but that's the point of this episode, is the minimal manning of EHS and the problems associated with, and then also being able to identify the correct manning that you need, because you can be bloated, you can be overstaffed, and sometimes that's an issue. But also understand that when you have HR, people operations, or another entity, whether it be production, that is taking on a lot of the roles that EHS people should be doing, it causes conflict. And what I mean by that is, if you have one safety individual and that person is the one responsible for the whole program, the whole system, and everything else, but you have leads or whatever in charge of their area and the safety in their area, are they more inclined to cover things up or not? Now, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Don't get me wrong on that one. But human nature is, I don't want to look like a failure at work. I don't want to look like I messed up, whatever. Now, if I'm in charge of my safety and we have something that was unsafe, am I going to report it? Let's leave that. Am I going to report it? That's an ethical dilemma. And unless you have other things in place to compel that person to report, besides their good nature, because sometimes even our good natured people will not want to report something. So it's one of those things. So I don't want to make this any longer than it has to be. So I covered the topic, and this might be another topic to get into, right? But that's it for this episode. EHS Concepts, the ways of safety. The minimum manning goes beyond the counts. It's about equipping those teams to foster secure, productive environments. So, hey, if you want in the comment section, share your manning experiences or questions down in the comments. I do thank you for joining. Like, subscribe, all that. That's everybody has to say, but stay adequately staffed and safe. I'll see you on the next one. Okay. Take care, people.